In high school, I was not very good at math, as much as I tried, and I didn't try actually very hard. So I still remember my math teacher in grade 9, Mr. Cook, who would give us a short quiz every Friday, Nightmare Friday. Every Friday, he gave us a short test, 2 or 3 questions, without fail. Now, his purpose was clear. At that point, I thought he was just being a real mean teacher. But in hindsight, it helped us to stay sharp. You focused or you failed, basically. But it helped us to stay sharp, and it probably gave him an indication that his material was getting through, or we were lazy and weren't studying. And it also helped us, these smaller quizzes helped prepare us for the bigger ones. In those days, grade 9, we had exams. Now you get it in grade 10, right? But elementary in my day was K to 8, not K to 7. So things have changed a bit. But these small tests actually prepared us for the bigger ones. Life is a series of tests, smaller ones and bigger ones, or what I call micro tests and macro tests. And all of them, we have to identify these tests and realize their due importance. The micro tests, and then leading usually to the macro tests. In the Gospel of today, Jesus tests Philip, and St. John captures this. He says, Jesus, said this to test Philip. Go feed these 5,000 people. Philip doesn't have anything in his pockets. Or if he does, they have a purse, but it's obviously not enough. Jesus knows generally how much is in the purse. So why this test? Well, as with Mr. Cook's weekly smaller tests, this test of Jesus is preparing Philip to deal with a much bigger question, a much bigger test, and that is the bigger test is, who is asking you to do this, Philip? Who's asking you to do this? That's the real test. On the human level, Jesus is asking Philip to do something that is not possible. And Jesus knows it's not possible, humanly speaking. That is to feed 5,000 men, probably along with adding on their wives and children, with only a very small sum of money. And even Andrew says, we got 5 and 2, but what's this we don't have enough to buy them a Timbit, So this is not going to go anywhere, Master. Remember, Philip could have responded to this test by reminding Jesus what he did at Cana. He's already seen the miracle of Cana. So he knows what he is capable, or at least he's beginning to realize what he's capable of doing and what he did once. Is this a one-off, or can he do this again? When he turned water into wine, and 180 gallons of it. And since there was very few resources there, he could have actually said to Jesus, Master, could you make enough for everyone here? We just don't have it. We know what you did at Cana. Could you do it here? But Philip does not do this, which reveals that he still needs to learn more about who is asking him this question. And Philip will fall into this error again, or at least this lack of awareness of who Jesus is, somewhere between the 8th and the 10th chapter of St. John's Gospel, when he says, Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied. And Jesus says, Philip, have I been with you all this time, 24/7, 365? Have I been with you all this time, and you still don't know who I am? To see me is to esteem the Father. You should know by now. So who is asking you this question? It's a big question. It's a huge question. When they wake him up and there's a storm on the Sea of Galilee and they think they're going to die, and they wake him up and say, Master, we're going to die. He stands up and he says, peace, be still. And boom. The Sea of Galilee is like glass. And what did they say? Who is this? Who is this? No human being can do that. They know that. No human being can actually calm the forces of nature, dominate the forces of nature. Nobody can do this. Who is he? He's not Kal-El from Krypton. So who is he? Who is this? Who's asking you the question? It's a huge question. And just because you and I know the answer doesn't mean we necessarily have answered the question or lived the question correctly. By the end of this chapter, knowing who he is, knowing who is asking the question will become critical for continuing to follow Jesus. Jesus is only worth following because of who he is. He's only worth following because of who he is. Who do you think Jesus Christ is? And again, not just we can give the right answer verbally, but does that match with the way we at least try to live? Because Jesus said, Matthew chapter 7, those who say to me, Lord, Lord, will not get into heaven. This is not enough. But those who do the will of my Father. All right, so it's action. Yes, it's good to have the proper articulated awareness of who Jesus is. More important that we actually do what he wants us to do. So it's in the behavior, it's in the actions. As well as in Matthew 25 at the scene of the Last Judgment, blessed are you, come into the inheritance prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For you visited the sick, right? You visited me when I was sick. The actions of the individuals. So who is Jesus in your mind? Who is Jesus in your actions? It's a question that we all need to ask. Who is the one who changes water into wine and calms the forces of nature? Jesus continues to test his disciples. Now he continues to test you and me. Just as these people in the gospel had to go out of their way to make an effort to be with Jesus, you and I need to go out of our way to be with him as well. And that is part of the test. He could have actually performed this test in the Temple of Jerusalem, but he doesn't. Probably because most of the people there were opposed to him. They were not disposed to faith. He chooses to do it marching these people three days into the wilderness, and he knows what he's doing. It's not all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I didn't plan this out, I don't have a plan, I'm in trouble now. No, Jesus knew what he was doing 3 days into this area. He knows they don't have food, but he's doing it because there's a disposition there to receive what he's going to say. They don't all pass the test, but some of them will. So, for example, when it comes to our life, when Jesus calls us to pray, he's testing us to see if you will respond to him because of who he is. How many of you have felt the inner need or the urge, the deep desire, and the need to pray more? Where do you think this is coming from? Is it Catholic guilt? Maybe. I don't know. But we need to discern the question, where is this coming from? If Jesus never tested us, never tested you, you would never know what was inside of you, what was in your heart. Is it resolve? Is it tenacity? Is it the refusal to stay down when you fall down and bloody, metaphorically speaking, bloody your nose? Commit sin or can't seem to get out of it? Or is there a lack of interest, laziness, and so on? If you think about it, every day is like a test. Will we show up grumpy or with a positive attitude? Even if you are grumpy, that's where the real test comes in. And this is very difficult. And just try it, and you'll find out how difficult it can be. Because everybody should see the way I am. I should, display my anger bucket to everybody, which is a bunch of malarkey. Of course, it can be very self-centered. To show up and try to be cheerful for everybody I'm living with, even if I'm living with myself. Because if I am always negative with myself, I'm going to be negative, and that's only going to drive me down a dark hole. But to live with other people and to feel grumpy, but trying to be cheerful is not hypocrisy, is not being two-faced. It can be, but it's actually sacrifice for love of the people I'm living with. And actually that will help me overcome many of my moods. The outcome of many of these mini tests can lead us closer to Christ or further away from him. They can lead us to a deeper faith in who he is, or they can actually lead us to a more shallow understanding of who Jesus is. We have to ask ourselves, was Philip paying attention when Jesus turned the water into wine simply by willing it? They filled it, there was water. He said, go, it takes them out, and all of a sudden it became wine. They had to know this, and St. John says this was the first of his miracles. So does Philip actually connect that episode in the past with Jesus asking him to feed these people? It would seem not. How are we going to feed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish? We know that Jesus was striving to draw Philip and the others to a deeper faith in who he was. We know the true answer is possible because Peter will give it by the end of John chapter 6. When Peter says, our Lord says, are you going to go away as well? And Peter says, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. And then the next part is what's critical. We believe that you are the Holy One of God. So the answer is possible if one disposes oneself to the gift of faith. For now, at this point, to kind of stretch out John chapter 6 is what we're going to do over the next 5 Sundays. Jesus wants to lead Philip to faith that he is God. He is the God of Israel. He is the one who will say, before Abraham ever was, I am. So whether you believe it or not, Jesus is very clear on who he is claiming to be. He is not claiming to be a God, but God, uppercase G, and the God of Israel. They understand what that means. The one who brought all existence into the universe, the one who was Lord of 6 days of creation, and so on and so on. So for now, he wants to lead Philip to this understanding, to this awareness, this belief that he is God, and therefore the 5 plus 2 problem is not a problem at all. See, 5 plus 2, feeding 5,000, is not possible from a human point of view. But put another term in front of the human math. God plus 5 loaves plus 2 fish, and all of their wives and children is not a problem for Jesus. You say, well, that's, okay, that happened back then. It still continues to happen. When God asked Ignatius of Loyola to found the Jesuits, he had nothing in his pockets. When God asked Francis of Assisi to start the Franciscans, he didn't call him that. He had nothing. He was a man of poverty. He actually gave everything he had away. He had nothing. And I mean nothing. Nada. Zilch. Josemaria Escrivá had no money in his pocket when God wanted him to found Opus Dei. Mother Teresa. It goes on and on. These are so-called religious and priests. But there are many people who are so generous with God, whether it's with their time or their talent or having many children, and they wonder, how can I do this? This is not possible. Now again, it's not just letting everything go, but it's actually putting Jesus in front of the equation. And I've known so many people, once they do that, a lot of stress, a lot of fear is gone from their life. Because the one who's in front of the equation is the one who calms the Sea of Galilee, is the one who says, before Abraham ever was, I am, is the one who takes bread and wine and actually through a fallible, weak clay instrument turns bread into God. You can't reason to that. That's why we need to begin our day with Jesus to help us, ask him to help us be prepared for the many occurrences, for the many little tests that will come our way, that form our character, that either lead us to Jesus and deeper faith or lead us away from him. We need to ask ourselves the question, who is asking me to pray? Where is this coming from? It's a very important question. It's so obvious, but perhaps you don't ask the question. Where is this desire for me to pray coming from? Is it coming because Father Hamilton makes me feel guilty that I'm not praying? I hope to God not. Because you shouldn't do it because I'm encouraging you to do it. You should do it in response to where the Lord wants you to be. I hope I can encourage people, but never be the person who's kind of making them feel guilty maybe that that's what they should be doing. We are all tested many times a day throughout the day. with our own version of needing to feed 5,000 people. If we rely upon Christ and then strive to work things out, things can and will fall into place. Sometimes it's just trying to manage a crazy schedule between family and work and faith, a prayer life. Many times, people today, they focus on time management. And I just heard this a couple weeks ago, and it made perfect sense to me, because I've read quite a bit about time management. This person says there's no such thing as time management. There's 24 hours in a day, and you can't control 24 hours in a day. What there is priority management. We need to have priorities. Everybody has them, whether you say you have them or not. So you have them whether you say or admit you have them or not. Everyone has priorities by exactly what they do. And that sometimes can be rather embarrassing. That's a priority because I do it all the time and I don't do that. Even though I want to do that, but I keep doing this. So I may need to do things to help me fix that, so the actual priorities I want to do are the priorities that I wind up doing. But priority management is huge. But we've got to turn to Christ, maybe other things, but Christ has got to be in front of the equation. And allow him to guide our math, our human math, the 5 plus 2. We have to ask ourselves, who is the one asking me the question? Jesus will continue teaching his disciples and continue testing them. We know that by the end of chapter 6, many will not do well. And as a result of this, they will leave him. And the reason is because they're not really disposed to who Jesus is. The fact that Jesus is asking them in that case, he cannot be wrong. He just didn't do enough to convince them. He just didn't do enough, like I can be miserable at my presentation. Jesus could only be perfect in the way he presented himself. So they had everything they needed, but they weren't open. Some of them were, and we know that's Peter, and there are obviously others who were. So Jesus will continue teaching his disciples and continue testing them. As Philip was with Jesus every single day, I ask you to resolve to either renew this or to initiate it, to spend 15 minutes with Jesus in prayer every day. This is a micro decision that will lead to a bigger macro decision, prepare you for bigger decisions in your relationship with him. Asking Jesus every day to help you get to know who he really is. He's not just a moral teacher. He's not just a nice guy. But Jesus is the Son of the living God, the one that the apostles are willing to die for.